Alrighty. Hello and welcome to the Streaming Parson podcast. And yes, it has been ages since I've done one of these because, of course, when there's gaming projects, it's really hard to find time to do these kind of things. That's just how it is. Today we have a kind of interesting topic that I don't know. I know I kind of went off on somebody on another stream. So the context of today's topic is keeping it sacred, and the context for that is on my buddy Baruka's stream. Toasty Baruka. I should honestly just put a link to his channel, but just type in Toasty Baruka, you'll find him pretty quick. I'm a co-host on his channel, and we were playing some. I think we were playing Dead by Daylight. I think it was a Thursday stream or something. It was a couple of days ago, but something that kind of inspired today's podcast talking topic. And basically, what had happened was I kind of went off on this kid a little bit because I'm not sure. I think he's like Baruka's cousin or something like that. I think he's his cousin or something. Like Baruka knows him personally, and he is a lot younger, so I assume he's like his cousin or something. But anyway, this guy, Burke's cousin, he has this thing where he likes to see. There's no way of saying this without sounding mega condescending, but I think it's important to talk about it. And it's not just him who does this. So this is like hence the reason for this today's discussion. But it's not just Burke's cousin that does this. But basically, you'll have those like younger guys in your chats, and this is something for all streamers and vloggers or whatever to keep mindful of. And there's always that younger guy who like, oh, I got some cool news of like updates of whatever, and they'll just spew out all this stuff in the YouTube channel. They'll spam it a little bit with their breaking news and stuff like that, quote unquote breaking news. But of course, I don't think they understand how breaking news works. But anyway, he was like, oh, breaking news. I have news about Fire Emblem Three Hopes, a game that's coming out in a couple months. We just started May. It comes out the end of June. So let's say 2 months. A game that's coming out in 2 months from now. He's like, oh, I got information and updates on the new Fire Emblem game that's coming up, and it's got some spoilers in it. And I immediately just respond like, don't say it. Don't say any spoilers. And part of it was because, of course, I'm going to play Three Hopes. Not on the channel, but I'm going to play it. Just because, a nice mindless game, considering some of the games we've been playing on the channel and stuff like that. And I've just started, actually, my second Triangle Strategies playthrough. Just for myself, just to play through the game again. And stuff like that. A lot of these more thinking kind of games. But, a game like Fire Emblem Three Hopes, which is a warrior style game, it's just kind of there for you to have fun with, your family or whatever. I play with my younger brother, and we'll probably have some shits and giggles as we mindlessly play through a warriors game. And, of course, it's also Fire Emblem and all that. So I'm going to play the game. And so the last thing I want is any spoilers on a game that's coming out. But Burke's cousin, and that's how I will refer to him for the rest of the video, he was ready to just spill. But I cracked down on him, and I was like, no, you do not say any spoilers. And I said it out loud. I was like, is nothing sacred to you? And after thinking about it a little bit, it made me wonder about, this kind of culture we live in, especially in the internet age, where you can like find out stuff long before it occurs. And even like new content on the whether it's video games or television or whatever, new content doesn't stay new content for very long. Because, for instance, and I made this joke back when I started Triangle Strategies. As soon as the game came out, I avoided stuff on YouTube to avoid like other people's playthroughs so that I wouldn't get spoiled on the game. And of course, one of the reasons why I did not have high viewership of Triangle Strategies was because some of my friends who would love the game, they didn't want to watch it because they didn't want to get spoilers. And so, of course, in the stream format, I mean, it can't be helped when you want to play a game while it's new and stuff like that. But the idea is that, like, in the internet age, you can find stuff out immediately. And, movies were really bad. I remember when, uh, what would you call it? No Way Home. Spider-Man No Way Home came out, and there were spoilers on the internet like the next day. And I remember I was talking with a coworker of mine, and he was like, I was already spoiled on the movie, even though he had not seen it yet. I saw it right away. I saw it the day of, so I, got to see it fresh and all that. But because of stuff like social media, movies and entertainment can easily be spoiled pretty quickly. And it made me think about something. Hence, now we go back to this idea of keeping it sacred. Now, I was reflecting on why do we have this need, if you will, of protecting ourselves, if you will, from having things like entertainment spoiled. And I was thinking about this idea of we as human beings are a weird mix of, one, it's part of it is curiosity. So human beings are a very curious race, and this has its advantages. This is how we have created technological advancements, because human beings want to know more about the universe, and as we learn more about the universe, we need to develop the tools that we need to do that. And so the birth and evolution of technology is for that reason, is so that we can know more about the universe we live in. And by extension, we create technology to improve our lives so that we can, be more philosophical and stuff like that. Because of course you think of, like, in the Middle Ages, for example, and the reason why people thought it was the Dark Ages, or people refer to the Middle Ages as the Dark Ages, is because since technology did go a little bit backwards, and then people were stuck in this continual, you just live to survive. And so all agriculture and stuff like that, everything was done for the sake of, like, people were struggling to survive. So because people were struggling to survive, nobody had time to really delve into philosophical thought, which was the big contrast between, some years earlier when you had, like, the late religious empires, so like the Byzantine empires, and of course the birth of the Ottoman Empire and stuff like that. And those times there was a lot more enlightenment in people's thought because people had time to indulge in some philosophy. But during the Dark Ages, this didn't happen. A lot of that was lost, and so people didn't have the time to think about stuff like philosophy. And this is where every philosopher will tell you, like, the importance of philosophy is that it really gives us that time to really evaluate everything that we've done and allow ourselves to grow as a culture. And all your philosophy majors will tell you that. But basically, what the point I was getting at is that when you don't have that time for that philosophy kind of thinking, when you don't have time for that, you don't care about, curiosity and the need for it, the human need for exploration and fulfilling that curiosity. It's not necessitated because you're too busy trying to survive. But we don't live in that period. Of course, starting with the Renaissance and moving, to this day, we are much more philosophy oriented as opposed to, just fighting for survival. And, thank God for modern technology because we can do that now. But of course, now we've run into the opposite problem, where because things are so good in our time period, yeah, there's obviously problems like war and crap like that, and certain illnesses that are running amok, for the most part, life is pretty good. And because of that, we have a lot more time, if not too much time, to indulge in our curiosities. And I use that wording carefully, that we indulge in our curiosities. Because, of course, the human life is supposed to be a balance of how much of your curiosities you just constantly feed. And then, of course, being able to rest and take time, not just fulfilling your curiosities. Of course, the extreme of this, we refer to this as hedonism, where you just kind of like your curiosities, you just constantly feed them and try to satisfy unending amounts of curiosity. And hedonism is like an extreme of that, which is kind of what our culture has fallen into because we have it so good in our day and age. But now we've kind of run into this other problem in the face of the human desire for curiosity. And that is the oversaturation of information and the ability to acquire information, because the internet age is the internet age, and social media propagates the movement of knowledge far faster than anyone would have anticipated. Like if I told you like 20 years ago, like, oh yeah, we'll be at a point where you could know about stuff across the world literally minutes after it started, and you would be like, that's ridiculous. No one could do that. That wouldn't be possible. But here we are in the 2022, and that's exactly what we can do. We can just know stuff in seconds, whatever events going on in the world and whatever. And so the movement of information like that, it creates this kind of tightrope of that human need of curiosity, to the point that we're almost jaded to that we're almost jaded. And because we've become jaded, we've numbed our sense of curiosity. Now back to the subject, the original subject at hand is, keeping it sacred. And I think one of the things of why we put emphasis on, I use entertainment as my primary example, and it will be the main talking point. Hence the hashtag spoilers and my hatred of spoilers in general. And when I was going off on my buddy's cousin, I was like, you don't spoil things for people, because that's like one of the biggest asshole moves you could do to someone. Is just to spoil, entertainment. We read new content, we play new video games, we watch new movies for the sake of that sense of curiosity, and by extension the sense of wonder. And this is the other thing too. There's a curiosity bit of human nature, and there's also the need of a sense of wonder that we as human beings desire to be like put in a state of awe and to adore and admire something. And the religious person would use the language of like the need of worship. Human beings are pre-programmed for a sense of worshiping something, and there's truth in that. And I think the way that we utilize entertainment is to maintain that sense of the need of worship in the sensation of a good story being told, or a good film being, entertaining or whatever. And the sequence of events create this sense of like freshness. That's not a real word, or not a proper way of using that word, but like you desire something fresh in your life, and your sense of wonder desires this, how do I put it? It's really hard to put this into proper words, because it's not something that like I can just put into words. It's a feeling thing. It's a feeling thing, and we all have these feelings, and we all desire those feelings to be tickled. And that's why we go from new thing to new thing, from new trends to new entertainment segments or whatever. That's why we do what we do, because we always want that this is fresh feeling in our entertainment. And of course, that's completely natural, and there's nothing wrong with that in a vacuum. There's nothing wrong with that. So, with that said, though, that's why there's that hatred of people just spoiling stuff for you. But one of the things that I chewed out my buddy's cousin, even though he's like a lot younger, I'm like at least twice that dude's age, if not more than that, because I'm an old man at this point. But one thing I was chewing him out for was that I know you're trying to sound cool. You're as a teenager, you want to be cool, so you want to think what's one of the things that teenagers do the most that makes them think they're really cool. They do one of two things. A teenager will either be a little, a little know-it-all. They want to act like they know everything, and so because they know everything, people will then like them because they know everything, and there's nothing that they can't respond to and all that. But eventually people get tired of the know-it-alls because they're like, oh god, like you just suck the fun out of life, and and then you become annoying because of that. So there's that kind of teenager, and then the other one is the little shit who acts all edgy because he thinks being edgy makes him cool, but all it does is just ruin their own life. And then people are like, okay, like your edgy thing was cool for like the first 2 seconds, but I have better things to do in my life. And so, those are like the 14-year-olds who brag about doing drugs. It's like there's nothing cool about doing drugs at the age of 14, dude. Like there's nothing cool about that. And so those are your two kind of teenagers. I mean, in a nutshell, obviously, not. I am generalizing, and there's an obvious range in this because it's not just like one or the other. Of course, people are like a spectrum in this, right? So, you know, Burke's cousin trying to be this little know-it-all. It does get there is that aspect of one reason why he's like kind of annoying to deal with because he's a teenager who wants to come off cool by thinking he knows everything and being able to like spew out all the knowledge he has, thinking that like, oh, it'd be great if everybody could be as enlightened as me kind of idea. And that's kind of what runs through teenagers' heads. And that's, I understand that, but at the same time, you need to draw that line. It's fine to show off how smart you are and how much you know, but you need to know how to keep things. You have to be able to share knowledge without ruining a people's sense of wonder and their own curiosities, because one of those things about the human life experience is about human beings exploring and fulfilling their own curiosities on their own. There's that sense of fulfillment in life in that. And there's a beauty in that. That's one of the joys of life, is that we can go out, we have our adventures, and in those adventures we fulfill that curiosity, which by extension fulfills our sense of meaning in life. And we all do that in our own different ways, and that's the beauty of that. But that's why the little know-it-alls get tiring pretty quick, because they're like, look, my life is mine to live, and so if I want to know something, I will learn it myself. I will figure it out myself. I don't need you to tell me what to think. I don't need you to tell me how everything turns out. Because what's the point of reading a story if you already know how it's going to end? Or what's the point of flipping to the last page and not understanding how the story built up to that kind of idea? And so let's draw back to, well, keeping it sacred. And I use that wording because I know like the religious mindset is like, oh, like there's this, the sacred is what's separated from, the regular, the vulgar is the word commonly used, which vulgar just really means like the everyday people thing. Of course, now we've associated vulgar with like way worse things than that, but the reason for that is because of how the split between the patricians and the plebeians were kind of treated. So like the patricians viewed themselves as being like, because they're patricians, they're naturally morally superior. And so everything else the common people do is kind of like, oh, it's so gross. And so that's where we kind of get that wording from. But anyway, the idea of sacred and vulgar. And so in my mind, and now this part, take it with a lot, with some grains of salt here, because at this point we're talking about my opinion. But I like to think that there's this. We need to kind of go back to this idea of like keeping things sacred in the sense of, certain things should be upheld with a high sense of value. And so, in the entertainment example I was using, not being spoiled in like movies and video games, we need to keep that as a high value thing, to not be spoiled in those things. Because, from a person who consumes entertainment, I want to be entertained. And so part of the elements of entertainment is like, okay, plot twists in a story is one of them. And how those twists come around, we find those things entertaining. At least I find, like, when I'm playing through a game or something or reading a book, I find those plot twists very entertaining, and that's why I really dislike spoilers. Now, I know you might think, well, I don't really care about stuff like that, but part of it might just be that, like, okay, you might be a person who really holds nothing sacred in your life, and that's just, maybe that's how you live, and okay, fine, I'm not one to judge. But I like to think that, like, we need to have, all of us as people should maintain, not just have, but maintain our sense of wonder, and to always allow that part of yourself to never feel like it's fully satiated, because you never want to become numb. You don't want that sense of wonder to ever become numb, because you always want life to have its twists and turns and for it to be entertaining. That's kind of what makes life fun. Of course, I know these words may fall on some deaf ears, because I know there's a lot of cynicism in our culture. And of course, with the amount of cynicism, and in my Bible reading streams, I always talk against this kind of like, the way I word it is, ignore the naysayers. As I talk about in the book of Luke, Bible reading, for instance, when people talk like, oh, everything's just going to come to an end, people have that more apocalyptic worldview that, oh, everything's just going to come to an end anyway. So who gives a shit is how a lot of people have that kind, a lot of people have that kind of attitude. And that, I think part of that comes from the death, if you will, of our sense of wonder in our culture. Because another issue too is not just information. Information was just an easy example, but we could take this with like, okay, we're gonna go here, guys. So if you guys are uncomfortable about talking about like sex and stuff like that, yes, we're gonna talk about sex now. Wow, talk about sex in a podcast about keeping things sacred. What a twist! I bet nobody saw that coming. But anyway, if you guys are uncomfortable talking about stuff like sex, you're fine to tune out. That's fine. But here's your warning: I am going to talk about it as a prime example of the importance of keeping things sacred. So first word that I gotta say is, I know a lot of people will be like, oh my god, you're gonna sound like such a prude, aren't you? You're gonna be one of those people that's like, oh, sex, only have sex when you're married or whatever and stuff like that. And I am kind of saying that, but let me try and explain to you why. Not so much sex within the context of marriage, but I'm more all about the, like, okay, for example, exclusivity versus like casual sex. And so let's use sex as our example, as like the sense of wonder. Now, it's one thing when you have a bunch of dumb shit teenagers telling their little locker stories about, because teenagers are horny as frick, and what else is new? Tell me something new. But you know, it's one thing for teenagers to kind of talk about and fantasize and whatever. That's just teenage boy culture. Teenage girls do this too, but I'm just gonna use teenage boys as an example here. But at the same time, there's this that kind of locker talk comes from that sense of wonder and boys just being kind of verbal about it. Girls do it too in their own way, but guys are a lot more lewd and it's fun to make fun of them about it. And while you wish that you wish boys wouldn't talk like that, and for a real life example, we can make fun of my buddies on our Toasty Baruka server. Definitely go give his channel a check out, subscribe to his channel, tell him the streaming Parson sent you. But the guys over there, they do that locker talk. We're like the guys are over 20 and they still talk like this. And there's that part of like me that's like, you don't talk about women like that, and you shouldn't. Refer to like women's boobs as like mommy milkers and idiotic terms like that. You shouldn't talk like that. But at the same time, there's that sense of that it sounds so mean to say it this way, but I like the virgin sense of wonder that like the guys, because boys do this, they fantasize about being able to touch boobs and stuff like that. And that's completely normal because, well, one, it's an evolutionary thing, so that's how humans have always behaved toward one another. Not that I'm saying it's right, but what I am saying is that's a completely natural thing, is that desire of like touching of the sexual organ. It's just how people are. And it's, of course, when guys have that locker talk, it's that evolutionary desire plus that sense of wonder that humans naturally have. And so that's why some guys do kind of get carried away with their locker talk. But at the same time, there's an earlier, I think it was like 2 weeks ago on another Dead by Daylight stream. I swear, like I have some of my more philosophical like outlooks on life while we're playing while I'm getting hunted down by killers in Dead by Daylight. But anyway, we were having the sex talk. I was having the sex talk because I'm the old guy who has experience in life. It's just how it is. And we were talking about, well, the first thing we were talking about was like love, and it's not tacky for guys to talk about love. Okay, it's completely normal. There's nothing, okay, guys. There's nothing weird about it, but and this also kind of this talk of keeping things sacred, I guess, also stems from that video. It was from like last, like 2 Wednesdays ago or something like that. I can't remember, but we were talking about like how to approach, our desire to fulfill our desire for love, kind of thing. I was talking about like, okay, like it's totally fine to pursue women even at a young age, and as long as you're not doing that like casual, like don't follow that college hookup culture, which is just stupid beyond belief. And I think that's one of the things that like, okay, and now I'm gonna try and trace it back to our original topic here. But when I was telling one of the guys on Burke's server, don't fall into that like college hookup culture because it's stupid beyond belief. And we were having a heart to heart, and I was just kind of telling him like, you don't need to feel like you have to rush into these things, but allow your sense of wonder to build up your desire as well. And there's also that importance of why we have that sense of wonder, is that it also rouses like our desires for not just love and intimacy, which is what we were talking about originally, and we're still on the sex talk, so it's relevant, but it's about all kinds of things. That sense of wonder rouses your desire to have entertainment and to have good entertainment. That's why that's important. And so there's that need to, how do I put it, keep things in that sacred category, because if nothing becomes sacred and everything is just kind of free for all, whatever, for instance, like the issue of casual sex versus like sex in a loving relationship, or ideally in marriage. The idea behind that is that there's a fulfillment. And lots of people will say that the the main contrast, and I'm no exception to the rule. The main contrast when we talk about like criticizing casual sex, talk about the importance of like saving yourself for marriage kind of thing, is that, well, sex is meant to be fulfilling. It's meant to be. But if you take away that element of what sex is about, and where you get like the whole sexual revolution and everything's about like, oh, it's just a physical thing. It's just an interaction. It's just a transaction. I mean, that's, if you think about it like that. When people in the sexual revolution and modern day feminists now talk about like, oh, sex is just a physical transaction. Like, if you say that out loud, you realize like, holy crap, that's so dehumanizing. Like, two people putting their nasties against each other as like just a business transaction. Like, no wonder people think it's like gross. No wonder people think sex is such a gross thing, and why people are so taboo to talk about it. Because when you treat it like it's just like another day at the coffee shop, well then yeah, it's like, then then there's nothing good about it. There's really nothing good about it. But that's where I think we need to, as a culture, we should rebuild that sense of keeping things sacred. And it's not just to like entertainment and sex; it can be to all kinds of things. But those are kind of the two major talking points I have, so we're gonna stick with them. Could have worded that better. But anyway, hit a like if you get that joke. But anyway, in regards to like, for example, when the old conservatives and especially the religious types talk about like sex being like this sacred thing, and the idea is, it the belief is that it has some high level of importance to it, and so you should keep it as this like special sacred thing, and it's not just treated like it's anything else, because then if you lose that sense of wonder, in regards to like sex, for example, then that leads to all kinds of problems, because then you get this whole like nothing is ever good enough, and that's why you get depravity and the porn culture. And why that exists is because once you eliminate the sense of wonder that like makes sex have its significance and its importance, and the whole like, once again, I gotta use like religious language to do this, but when the consummation idea and this whole like spiritual bond and the two become one flesh kind of thing, and you think of like why religions talk that way about something like sex, and it they treat it with such a high value, because it it's paramount to the human experience. It's paramount to how humans ultimately interact and how important certain relationships are. It's not like you can't love everybody equally. Imagine if a guy said to his wife, "I love you just as much as I love all the women in the world." Well, that's an immediate file for divorce. Because a marriage, for example, is all about that exclusivity. You and your spouse is like, my life is yours and yours alone, and vice versa. Your life is mine and mine alone. And of course, that's why adultery is such a big, it's on the list of top sins, is because it's a breach of that kind of agreement, that my life is yours and yours alone, and your life is mine and mine alone. And there's kind of that, there's that, what makes a relationship special. And then of course sex is the concealment of that agreement. And so if you remove that kind of sacred element to it, then it creates depravity, and hence that's where porn culture comes from. All right, sex talk over. Going back to the entertainment kind of aspect, and where we were talking about, like, okay, Fire Emblem Three Hopes, and I know, weirdest transition you have ever seen in any video, I'm sure, but basically, it would be wrong to deny people of that kind of that fulfillment, if you will, in whatever it is that they're doing. Because I use sex as the extreme of that sense, fulfilling a sense of fulfillment in life, which is why religious circles have kept it in such a high regard, because it is one of the ultimate forms of human fulfillment. And so the relationship I'm trying to build here is that things are sacred because they're safeguarding things that are meant to provide real fulfillment in human life. But we can treat things that may not be as like ultimately fulfilling in life, like playing a video game is not going to be ultimately fulfilling in life unless you're a full-time game streamer or something. But even in things like playing a video game, and there's still that sense of you get fulfillment from it, which is why you do it. It's why we do anything, is that we desire that sense of fulfillment from that thing, a certain amount of fulfillment in our life. And so another reason of why we got to keep things sacred, in the sense of like not spoiling things, and once again that can also be treated to the extremes as well, but going back with like video games and entertainment, keeping things sacred so that even the small bits of entertainment we get here and there is fulfillment in doing that. And I think that's one of the reasons why one of the generational culture clashes, for instance, is like when parents don't understand why their kids like games. One big reason is that they don't empathize with like how us younger people get a certain amount of fulfillment from those things. Now of course it's not true for everybody, but just in generally speaking, we get fulfillment from playing games. That's why we do it. And so with that said, I think being wise, and us being wise as a culture, I think we should build this kind of like keeping it sacred, the gaming sphere, or entertainment sphere, if you want to be more general. And a big part of that is to allow yourself to have everything be like a blind kind of playthrough, or a first time viewing, or whatever terminology you want to use. The idea is that I'm getting at is you want your entertainment to feel like it's a first time thing. All right, I hear you. My cat is just being like, attention now, human. But anyway, all right, that's enough. I'm busy, mischief. Anyway, now of course the other element that we have to really discuss when it comes to this whole keeping it sacred is the social aspect, and how we don't spoil each other of like movie content or whatever, or game content, like not spoiling each other. And this is where I chewed out this other guy for like, that's like an asshole thing to do, is to spoil like a movie or a video game to someone, because you have denied them that fulfillment. And that's a very dangerous place for your society to go to, is when people go out of their way to deny people of fulfillment, whatever that might be. It's why, for instance, oh gosh, I guess we're gonna go there. It's why, like, once again, casual sex is a very dangerous thing because you're it could rob people of finding real fulfillment in the act of sex. It's why like overeating and gluttony could be denying people of fulfillment because there are a lot of people who would kill to eat, for a physical fulfillment, and you have denied them of that. It's why I'm trying to think of other examples of like denying people of their fulfillment, but you get the idea. And so spoiling people in movies and stuff like that is exactly the same kind of thing, though not to those extremes. I used some pretty extreme examples there, but I mean, you're on the Streaming Parson channel. You knew I was you know how things are around here. But the idea I want to get at as well is that even though it may seem trivial, keeping it sacred for stuff like movies and video games and not spoiling people, I think from that, if we cultivate a culture of not spoiling people, we can develop in future years how to keep more important things, like for instance sexual intimacy, how to keep things like that in their right place and to really allow people to have sense of fulfillment from those things. Because if people can't get fulfillment from small things like entertainment, which is the purpose of entertainment, is meant to be like small little quick fixes of that fulfillment in life. If those small fulfillment fixes, if you become numb to stuff like that and you deny people of those things, then how much worse would it be when the larger things in life do not provide fulfillment? And that's where you get, the nihilistic worldviews and the apocalyptic naysayers, is because they've lost that sense of fulfillment in their life. And that is truly a sad thing to see. That's truly a sad thing to see. Because those people are the most that's what makes those people so dangerous is and then sorry, let me backtrack a bit. That those people are so dangerous, and the reason why they're so dangerous is because then things like envy and coveting creates a sense of, well, if I can't be fulfilled, then I will make sure no one else's life is fulfilled. And that's where you get all those apocalyptic naysayers. And why I always tell you, ignore those people, because they're just there to suck out the joy out of your life. But life is all about living. It's all about allowing yourself to have those moments of fulfillment. And those come in many different ways. I just used a couple of examples. But if we no longer had those sense of like fulfillment as we, feed our curiosities and our sense of wonder, if we could no longer acquire fulfillment from that, I hate to say it, but life would almost not be worth living. Because then, like, why bother? What is the point of doing anything else? Like, you think of how, once again, work, like the need for work, and why do we work? Now, the simple answer is like to make money. Well, then, okay, then what happens when you have that money? Well, you use that money to leverage, if you will, what you need to find other forms of fulfillment. So, the old saying, money can't buy you happiness, which is true, but at the same time, money's purpose is to be a tool to help you find happiness, if that makes sense. Money is a tool that is designed to help you find happiness. And so how you get there. And of course, there are right and wrong ways of doing it, like with anything else. But you can't be so arrogant to say that, like, money cannot lead, like, you cannot be led to happiness by material things. Not to say that, I'm not saying that, like, I'm not saying that material things will make you happy, but things in life and the stuff you use in life can help you build experiences that are your happiness moments. So, you know, dating advice, right? So, you know, you go on dates. Why do people go on dates? Is because they want to build that, you know, sense of fulfillment in a relationship. Completely normal. You have to use money on a date. I mean, there are some ways of like, okay, spending as little as possible, but you know, you're gonna need you still need it. And there are times where you have to do things a little bit more costly. You know, go on a go on a trip with your girl, you know, that kind of thing. And there's, you know, if you go on a nicer trip, or you go like a day to the amusement park or something, like that's going to cost you. And so how do we get that money to be used as a tool to do stuff like that? Well, you got to work. But if people don't find the end goal, the later goals, I guess you could say, for example, the dating thing, as I was using as my example, if people don't use stuff like dating as like a way to create a sense of fulfillment in your life, then of course the means of getting to the ends will also be viewed as like, well, there's no fulfillment in this. And of course, like work is not designed in of itself to be fulfilling. It's what you are able to do with your work efforts. You know, your rewards, if you will. Those are supposed to be the things that fulfill you. And so if people don't find the end goals to be fulfilling, then no one's going to find the means to be fulfilling at all. And of course, unfortunately, in our culture, since so many things of like the end goals are now not deemed sacred, say relationships, for example, or, you know, much trivial thing, buying that new game when it comes out and playing it for the first time, if those things are not fulfilling, or there's no sense of fulfillment in them, then all the steps you took to get there would also be extremely unfulfilling. And then that's where you get all the nihilists, and why you get all your crazy socialists and crap like that that talk about like, oh, you know, need to change how the work system works and all that. And the reason why is a lot of people don't want to work is because they're just so dissatisfied with everything. And that's what the real workers revolution is that, well, only, you know, people just do as they please and only work as they want to work. But then of course your society would crumble pretty quick. I don't know why I made that political all of a sudden, but it's that kind of mindset that sucks the fun out of life and sucks that fulfillment out of other people's lives. And you know, don't be those people. Okay, like you don't want to be the asshole who goes around sucking the fun out of people's life, because that's a very dangerous road to go down. Like those are the worst kind of people. Is people who suck the fun out of other people's fun in their life. You know, because human beings just want to live their life. And I mentioned this in past podcasts and past streams and stuff like that. But I'll use this example as well. When in Canada we had the whole like vaccine mandates and like the limitations on like people going to, like, for instance, going to a restaurant. And of course there would be the truckers revolution. Of course there would be. Because what the government was doing was denying people of a basic human sacrament. And that is to be able to go out and eat with your friends, to go out and be a community. And I made the joke, and I'll make it again. Like since the caveman days, you know, human evolution was all about that community. And so when the government was like, "Oh no, you can't do that," you know, you've cut off a major part of human fulfillment. And I'll say it again. One of the most one of the greatest joys of life is just to go and eat with your friends. It is. It's one of the greatest joys in life, just to be in each other's company, eat food together, laugh about stupid shit. That's one of the greatest joys of life. That's so fulfilling. But if you cut off that from people, your life would just become miserable. And that's why, think of like things like the increase of depression among young people is partly because of that. And God, these last couple of years of lockdowns and crap like that only made it worse. And so like no wonder we have this like epidemic of like young people being extremely depressed, is because there's when nothing is sacred, when nothing is held to be of this special value, which is really the real meaning of the word sacred anyway. If nothing is held to a special high end value, then people lose out on that desire to live. I know that's a pretty harsh way of putting it, but you lose the will to live if there isn't that sense of like even the stupid little things I do don't give me fulfillment. Because I mean that's the human experience is all about finding joy in your life through all the little bits of fulfillment. Because I think one of the other things too that we have a big misconception of is that it's got to be like this grandeur thing, when you find that fulfillment in your life. But more dating tips coming from yours truly. But like I'll tell you, I told you guys this tip back at like Valentine's Day, and I'll tell you this tip again because it's a tip you should always be using. But fellas, okay, so you want to buy your girl flowers. The trick is, now of course buying flowers in general is costly, but when it comes to like getting her little gifts and crap like that, most guys think, I'm gonna make like a once a month big event. Like, oh, in a month we're gonna go like the super sweet restaurant. I mean, of course you still gotta do that once in a while. But, a guy thinks he's gonna do one big thing, one big, celebration thing. And then he'll be like, he thinks, well, that'll hold her. But it doesn't hold her because, your girl wants more out of you. And so, your girl wants more out of you. And so, the trick is that you just put a bunch of small things and you make her on a continual state of like she's getting little bits of fulfillment. And so, for instance, buying flowers. I never buy a bouquet. I never do. It's kind of silly. You don't need to do that. The trick is every day, or most days. I don't do it every single day because that's kind of silly. You don't have to do it every single day, but like very frequently, like let's say like 5 out of 7 days in a week, I'll buy one flower and I give her the one flower. Or, it might be like chocolate or something. It doesn't matter what it is. I get one thing and I give it to her every time I see her, which is pretty frequently. And so I do that day by day. And every time, she's always excited again. And it's because of that, that sense of that little bit of fulfillment here and there. And as you keep the little bits of fulfillment, and you take it in your small doses, then you know that your life is fulfilling because you're feeling that sense of fulfillment continually as opposed to like episodes of fulfillment. And I think that's another thing too, not to get too deep into this topic now because I know it's already 5 o'clock and I'm going to end this stream pretty soon. But that's another reason why depression is so rampant. It's because I think people are too used and have been habituated to like, well, no, the sense of fulfillment has to be these big events. But big events don't happen that often. The big fulfilling events. They don't happen that often. So then you go for long times without getting that sense of fulfillment from your, ridiculously high expectations. And so you go these long episodes without it, and then you start feeling miserable because it hasn't happened for so long. But the important thing is to find fulfillment in all the little things. And so I think that's why we need to keep things, even trivial things, sacred, as opposed to just making everything like a free for all. Because then that's what creates those more depressing episodes in people's lives. Because then if everybody's expecting the sense of fulfillment only from, you know, the utmost, you know, out there sacred things, then you're going to be disappointed way more often than you're not, because those big things don't happen often. You know, it's one of those things that, like, from a religious perspective, and when people, like, so many Christians fall into this pitfall, and I have called out many a Christian for, like, don't think like this. But when people, like, that need of a miracle and, like, God's signs, you know, what big sign is God gonna do? It's like, don't look for the big things, because you're gonna miss out on the miracles that God is doing in people's lives. And, you know, as I do my Book of Acts read, shameless self-promotion, definitely check it out. In the Book of Acts, I think one of the things that for the people were inspired in the first century church was that God was doing little things in people's lives, and people's lives were changing. And it's the changing of people's lives that was the miracle that many Christians today tend to forget. It's like, oh, we want God to do something big. It's like, God changing people's lives is already pretty big. What do you mean? What do you mean? You want something bigger than that? You want something bigger than something that may be the most important thing to someone else's life? You want something bigger than that? Like, how greedy can you get? But instead, I think the important thing is to search for fulfillment in the little things. Which, you know, in conclusion, coming back to, let's just take our video game analogy of keeping things sacred. You don't spoil games, because, you know, we're all trying to find our little bits of fulfillment here and there. And gaming is a place where we find our little bits of fulfillment here and there. But if you spoil the plot of a game, or you ruin the gaming experience for somebody, and it doesn't just have to be like ruining an RPG story, but, you know, even like making a game not fun for people by, like, ruining certain parts of it. So an example of this is like Dead by Daylight, because I've already mentioned that game a couple of times in the stream. You know, those some killers. You know, this is why, like, you gotta play with honor, and I talked about this in an older stream. You gotta play with honor, because you don't want to be the asshole who ruins Dead by Daylight for someone else by being a terrible, like, player to play with, especially those killers that, like, tunnel and camp and crap like that. You know, don't be those people. Don't spoil. And now I'm using the word spoil in a much more broader sense. Don't spoil the game for people like that. You don't want to ruin that experience, because people are trying to find what little bits of fulfillment are in their lives. And to rob that of someone is a pretty nasty thing to do. It's a pretty nasty thing. And so I think that's why we should hold a lot more things to be more sacred. Now, I don't take it to the extreme of, like, every video game is sacred all of a sudden. Like, you know, don't you know, this isn't Monty Python, okay? Not every sperm is sacred kind of thing. But at the same time, I think we need to hold more things to a higher value, as opposed to just, like, going out of our way to ruin things for other people, and going out of our way to spoil content and entertainment for people. Because if we ever hit that point as a society and as a culture that we are no longer finding fulfillment in small things like that, you're in huge trouble. Because then, then everyone will fall into the mindset of, if no one can be happy, if I can't be happy, no one can be happy, and that will be a very miserable place to live in. And so the need of keeping things sacred allows us to find joy in anything that we do. And so I think we should hold a lot more things to be sacred. in all kinds of spheres of our lives. It doesn't have to be the extreme things like, okay, sex is like the extreme case, which I used because this is the streaming Parson channel. What did you expect? Of course, I was gonna go use extreme examples, but even in this, even in the regular, the daily life, I really believe we need to hold more things sacred, so that we can allow the little things to give us fulfillment too, and that's something that we cannot afford to lose. Anyway, that's all I wanted to talk about in regards to that. So, with that said, if you guys have questions of anything I just said in regards to keeping things sacred, go ahead, shoot. Do a little bit of housekeeping, and then we'll probably end the stream pretty soon. So, first and foremost, I totally forgot that next Tuesday, Songs of Conquest is coming out, which is why the podcast is only making a short comeback. Because once that game comes out, we're gonna be playing that game on the channel. I'm gonna play it, as a new game, fresh, blind. If you don't want to be spoiled in that game, don't come to the videos. But I will be playing Songs of Conquest fresh on the channel. And so that will be starting on the 11th of May, because obviously I'm not going to stream on the Tuesday. I work pretty late on Tuesday. So it won't be on the Tuesday, but on the Wednesday, which is May 11th, we will start our Song of Conquest playthroughs. Well, we'll see how the story plays out. Maybe it'll play like one of those older games that like you play one route, you play all the routes kind of thing. Just with like different units, like old school Heroes Might Magic. But I'm looking forward to Songs of Conquest. And it's coming out next week. I didn't know it was coming out this soon. Can you already believe it's May? Like, oh my goodness, it's already May. And then between Song of Conquest coming out next week and Xenoblade Chronicles 3 getting a push up and coming out in like the end of July, which yes, we will be playing that on the channel too. So, keep your eyes peeled for that. And we're going to have a busy summer. We're having a busy late spring and summer of good gaming content. So, with that said, that does mean that the podcast after next Monday will kind of stop being a thing for probably most of the year, because we got some hot gaming projects going on. So, I really wanted to get that, to really clarify that now. I do like these kind of, like, just be able to rant to you guys. Because I know I have to resist doing it during my Bible reading streams, because of course those are about Bible studies and I'm trying to teach you something. I'm not just ranting to you. But, it's fun to do these podcasts just to rant at you sometimes. Not, why lie about it? But that means the podcast will be kind of not a thing for a while. For who knows how long. Because, yeah, May and June is going to be Songs of Conquest. Assuming it takes me that long. Assuming it takes me that long to play that game. So, May and June is going to be Song of Conquest. July, once Xenoblade Chronicles 3 comes out, dude, that's going to be the end of the year. That's going to take me till, like, at least October. So, and then probably from, like, October to December, I'll probably take a break from games, right? So, those are the major gaming projects coming up. And I'm looking forward to Song of Conquest next week, as well as Xenoblade Chronicles 3 in starting basically August. I'm so looking forward to it. We're gonna have a grand old time, I'll tell you that much. So that was a big thing in the housekeeping I wanted to just say to you. As far as the rest of this week is concerned, this Wednesday we'll play something. I don't know, just screw around in something. I'm not sure. But we'll do something on Wednesday, and that will be at 2 o'clock Pacific time. And then Friday, we have our Bible reading stream. We'll be doing part 2 of our Book of Acts study. And that will be at 3 o'clock Pacific time on Friday. So that's kind of the rest of the week for you. Next Monday, we may do our last podcast for who knows how long, for a while. I mean, I haven't done podcasts for like 2 months because of, well, playing Triangle Strategy and how fun that was. Because that was a grand old time. I enjoyed that game too. But anyway, I'm sidetracking. Next week, we'll probably do a podcast and then we'll start Song of Conquest. So that's gonna be pretty fun. I'm looking forward to that. I hope you guys will join me for Song of Conquest as well. With that said, this is gonna be the end of the stream. Hope you guys enjoyed hearing me rant a bit. My mix of don't be an asshole and the sex talk. And, you know, I encourage you guys to keep it sacred. Don't be an asshole. And I will see you guys on Wednesday. Have a great rest of your day. And God bless you.